It was Shakespeare who coined the term chief nourisher in life's feast. Chief nourisher in life's feast. What was he talking about? Anybody know? Chief nourisher in life's feast. Well, it was put in a glorious way in Psalm 127, verse 2, where we read that He gives His beloved sleep. He gives His beloved sleep. Okay? Now, somebody's saying he's going to preach about sleep? This is Sabbath morning. It's not the honest thing I've ever done in my life, I'll tell you that. But a couple things. Number one, I believe what I'm going to share with you is quite beneficial. Number two, I've been preaching about things that have to do with our lives. We talked about how that we have the choice to choose how we're going to relate to our circumstances. Talked, I think, last week about, about how we, I think it was the week before, our paradigm, how we see things in the world, and how that relates to how we feel and so on. And I think you're going to see that a part of that is very much related. So this message, believe it or not, is related to those messages. Okay? And finally, dear friends, we live in, now we may be comfortable in our own circles, everything, but the culture around us is rapidly changing. And we live in serious times. And health is not something over here in the corner of our spiritual experience. It is very much related to our spiritual experience, okay? And I think as we go along, I hope, especially further toward the end, I hope we'll see that loud and clear. Okay, so He gives His beloved sleep. Twice a year, there's a global experiment involving 1.5 billion people at least, and I dare say that each one of you have taken part in that experiment, whether willingly, maybe willingly half the time, and unwillingly half the time. Some people know what I'm talking about, and that is, of course, daylight savings time. Did I hear they're going to do away with that, or is that just... Yeah, huh? Some are saying yes, some are saying no. But anyway, in the spring, we lose an hour of sleep. And researchers have tabulated millions of daily hospital records and have found on that day an alarming spike in heart attacks the next day. Okay? 1 hour. And it works both ways. That's good. In the fall, when we have opportunity to gain an hour of sleep, rates of heart attacks take a drastic fall the next day. And think about this. There's a similar rise and fall relationship when it comes to traffic accidents. The same with suicides. 1 hour lost sleep. Both the heart and the brain are affected by seemingly small changes in the amount of sleep. We think losing 1 hour of sleep just one night is meaningless, but the data shows that's not true. We can take the vehicle accidents a little further here. Actual data proves that vehicle accidents caused by drowsy driving exceed those caused by alcohol and drugs combined. Exceed those caused by alcohol and drugs combined. If we wake up at 7 a.m., which is not that early, okay, let's be clear. But if we wake up at 7 a.m. and remain awake throughout the day, at work for example, then stay out late socializing with our friends, drinking no alcohol, by the time we drive home at 2 a.m., we are as cognitively impaired as an individual who is legally intoxicated. May I say that we are supposed to be Christians, but in that scenario, we are driving drunk. Okay. By the way, a large study on this was done in Australia. We have more than one Australian citizen here today. And so one group, they were, what can I say? Part of their study was to become legally drunk. Okay. The second group was sleep deprived. After being without sleep for 19 hours, the second group mirrored the legally drunk group in results in concentration tests. They were the same. Significantly, the second group began their plunge in performance after just 15 hours without sleep. In other words, in the scenario that I outlined, at 10 p.m. When I was in the ninth grade, attending St. John Vianney High School, there was a friend of mine, pretty good friend of mine. I was a freshman, he was a sophomore, and he was excelling in hurdles, running hurdles. He was only in 10th grade. There was major universities already contacting him, and this was back in the day when they didn't do that quite as much. And he had a very nice little girlfriend, and one evening after, it was a Friday evening after, spending this whole day, he was there. Maybe after midnight he left. Nice guy. Out of control, slammed into a bridge, was paralyzed from the waist down the rest of his life. Yeah. All right. I probably shouldn't be selling drugs up here, but I'm going to tell you about something anyway, okay? It's an amazing thing, okay? Scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer, enhances your memory, makes you more creative, makes you look better, helps keep you slim, lowers food cravings, protects you from cancer and dementia, wards off colds and the flu, lowers your risk of heart attack and stroke, not to mention diabetes. You'll even feel happier, less depressed, and less anxious. How much would you pay for this drug? Well, of course, it's free. It's called sleep. Sleep will do every bit of that and more. Okay? There's more than, this is a couple years ago, there was more than 17,000 well-scrutinized scientific reports documenting the benefits of sleep. Okay. So, and I can tell you, I became interested in this several years ago when my dear wife was taking care of her very active, father with dementia and was getting very little sleep. And I could see her disintegrating before my eyes. That's the only way I know to put it. And she'd tell me, I don't feel well, which meant, from top to bottom. And of course, this is a part of the laws of health that, as a people, we've been familiar with for a long, long time. All right, here we go. This was supposed to be up for the last section. Now, We're going to talk about sleep and learning, sleep and memory, sleep and school, okay? Sleep and school, all these things apply here. So here's a group of healthy young adults in this case, divided into two groups. At noontime, both groups took part in a rigorous section of learning involving fact-based information. That's what we're talking about, fact-based information. Actually, it was 100 face name pairs that they were to learn. Face name. Okay? This type of learning is done in our hippocampus, part of the brain that's used for short-term memory. Okay? The hippocampus is like a USB memory stick. You can put stuff there, but only so much. Okay? And if it gets full, you may very well have something else has to be pushed out to put more there. Okay? So, the two groups performed basically equally in the learning session as one might expect. They were random groups. After the learning session, one of the two groups took a 90-minute nap in the sleep laboratory where they had electrodes placed on their heads to measure their sleep. The other group stayed awake in the library where they surfed the internet, played board games, etc. So later in the early evening, both groups tried to learn another 100 face names. Remember, in the afternoon, they performed equally. The group that had taken a nap did markedly better than the group that had stayed awake. In fact, those who stayed awake became progressively worse in learning, while those who took a nap actually improved their capacity to learn facts. At the evening session, the group that took a nap did a full 20% better than the others. Okay? You see, it's during that nap that the hippocampus can be emptied a little bit, moving to the cortex of our brain. Now, Dr. Matthew Walker, who is a world-renowned sleep scientist, he wrote a wonderful book. I think it's called Why We Sleep. And I'm going to quote from him because, he's actually the one that did the research that I just referred to. But listen what he says. This is, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. He said, quote, "We observed a strikingly," so he watched this data being moved from hippocampus to cortex. He said, "We observed a strikingly reliable loop of electrical current pulsing throughout the brain that repeated every 100 to 200 milliseconds. The pulses kept weaving a path back and forth between the hippocampus with its short-term, limited storage space to the far larger, long-term storage site of the cortex." So the main hard drive, if you will. He says, "In that moment, we had just become privy to an electrical transaction occurring in the quiet secrecy of sleep. One that was shifting fact-based memories from the temporary storage depot, the hippocampus, to a long-term secure vault, the cortex." He says, "In doing so, sleep had delightfully cleared out the hippocampus, replenishing this short-term information repository with plentiful free space. Participants awoke with a refreshed capacity to observe new information within the hippocampus, having relocated yesterday's imprinted experiences to a more permanent safe hold. The learning of new facts could begin again anew the following day." End of quote. The thing that number one, how fascinating truly we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Number two, just thinking about this little description here, we tend to think of sleep as just turn off the switch and we're doing nothing for hopefully 8 hours or whatever the case might be. That's not it. Our body is doing so much during that time, so much that's totally essential for our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. Okay. Now, still on the same topic here. Research has shown that for fact-based textbook-type learning, it is the early sleep earlier in the sleep cycle, which is rich in non-REM sleep, that provides superior memory retention relative to the late-night REM-rich sleep. So it's the early sleep. In fact, the researchers could predict with absolute accuracy, very high accuracy at least, how you would do if they simply knew how much deep NREM, non-REM sleep you had gotten the night before. It's just like that. Now, there was a letter written back in the year 1888. A non-college student wrote this letter. And a part of the letter said this: I know from the testimonies given me from time to time for brain workers, okay? That's what we're talking about here. For brain workers, that sleep is worth far more before than after midnight. I don't know how this lady knew that. Well, she said from the testimonies given me from time to time. And the Lord must have thought it was important because He had her write this for us. Okay? Sleep the night after learning, or sleep after learning, is also important. I just took a picture from the Global Junior Academy here. That's sorry. Okay. So sleep before learning is important, but sleep after learning is also very important. Sleep after learning sort of clicks the save button on the newly created files with the information therein. Experiments repeated time and time again have documented improved memory and learning of 20 to 40% being offered by sleep compared to the same amount with time awake. Okay. So there we go. He has given His beloved sleep, hasn't He? Now, our bodies produce two hormones, leptin and ghrelin. Leptin sends a message. Hey, you're full. You've had enough to eat. Okay. Ghrelin sends a message. Hey, you're hungry. Okay? Eat something. Well, a lack of sleep causes leptin levels to decrease and ghrelin levels to increase. So the messenger that's supposed to say, hey, you're full, not so much there. But there is another messenger, no matter you've already eaten. You're hungry. Simple as that. Okay. Now I'm not running like a diet show or something here. But let me just say this: that there's a reason that the first temptation the devil brought to Jesus in the wilderness had to do with appetite. Okay. This is important. It's important spiritually. Now, emotions. During REM sleep, which comes later in the sleep cycle, this is a sleep stage in which we dream. And this is also the only time throughout the whole 24-hour day that noradrenaline. I'll get this right here. The only time throughout the 24-hour day that the brain is completely empty of noradrenaline. Noradrenaline is the brain, the brain feature, the brain. It's the same as adrenaline in the body, but this is in the brain, noradrenaline. Okay, and of course you know that this is the stress hormone. This is the fight or flight hormone. Now, that said, when we are in REM sleep mode, is the only time that this hormone or this chemical is not present in the brain. Okay? So, during this REM sleep, as we dream, the key emotion and memory-related parts of the brain are reactivated. Okay? And so there's this combination. The key emotion and memory centers of the brain are active, and the stress-related chemical, noradrenaline, is not at work. So going through the memories of the day, the emotional memories of the day, but the stress chemical is not present. And so, in short, this type of sleep is healing. Emotional healing. So, a group of young adults, young healthy adults, were randomly assigned into two groups. Both groups were shown a set of emotional images while they were inside an MRI scanner that was measuring their emotional brain activity. 12 hours later, they were again placed inside the MRI scanner and were shown the same emotional images again, with their emotional brain reactions being measured. During the two sessions that were separated by 12 hours, the participants rated how emotional they felt in response to the images. The only difference between the two groups was that one group was shown the images in the morning and again in the evening. The other group was shown the images in the evening and then after 8 hours of sleep again in the morning. Guess what happened? Well, the group who slept between the showing of the images, those emotionally charged images did not have did not draw forth nearly as much emotion. And these would be like negative emotions as the group who had no sleep between the two showings of the images. Let me just repeat that here. So those who slept between being exposed to the images reported a significant decrease in how emotional they were feeling in response to seeing those images again. And the MRI scan showed a large and significant decrease in reactivity in the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain that creates painful feelings. On the other hand, those who did not sleep between being shown the images showed no dissolving of emotional reactivity. Their deep emotional brain reactions were just as strong and negative, if not more so, at the second viewing compared with the first, and they themselves reported that way. So sleep, specifically REM sleep, is needed in order for us to heal emotional wounds. There's lots of studies collaborating this. Okay? In fact, there was a drug that a physician at a veterans hospital was using to treat high blood pressure in post-traumatic stress syndrome patients. it worked somewhat for the blood pressure, but after a few weeks of taking the drug, his patients would report that the recurring flashback nightmares would go away. As it turned out, the drug, prazosin, had a side effect of suppressing noradrenaline in the brain. Noradrenaline is the fight-or-flight chemical in the brain that is not present during REM sleep. And of course, PTSD folks have abnormally high concentrations of this chemical in the brain. And because of this, prazosin became the VA's officially approved drug for treating repetitive trauma nightmares. But most of us can count on our body doing this for us during REM sleep. It's a beautiful thing, a beautiful thing. If I was the devil, I would fill the whole world with devices that could keep teenagers from getting sleep. Oh, wait. He's done that, hasn't he? Okay. All right. Now, emotional intelligence. Obviously, being able to sense the feelings of others is very important. One big way of doing this is to be able to read the expressions and emotions of others. A person's face can give a clearer signal of how a person is feeling than their words sometimes. There are regions of our brains whose job it is. We are so fearfully and wonderfully made. There are regions of our brains whose job it is to pick up on emotional signals, especially as revealed on faces. Those very regions of the brain are recalibrated, so to speak, by REM sleep every night. It's just like a musical instrument being tuned every night, ready for the next day. So REM dream sleep resets our brains so we can wake up able to discern overt and even subtle little micro expressions with accuracy. But a dream-starved brain cannot accurately decode facial expression. So, after a good night's sleep, participants were shown many pictures of a specific person's face. This is the only graphic I could find that illustrated this, but not that well. But because each picture was a little different. The facial expression in the pictures of that one person varied across a gradient, shifting from friendly to increasingly unfriendly, stern, and even threatening. Okay? So each picture of the individual was just slightly different from the ones on either side of it. And the pictures expressed, as I said, everything from very friendly to definitely unfriendly. So these participants viewed the faces in a random order while their brains were being scanned in an MRI machine, and they rated how approachable or threatening the images were. The MRI scan allowed researchers to actually measure how their brains were interpreting and accurately separating the threatening facial expressions from the friendly ones after having had a full night's sleep. And all the participants repeated the same experience, but this time they were deprived of sleep. Okay? Half of the participants went through the sleep deprivation session first, followed by the sleep session second, and vice versa. In each session, a different person was featured in the picture, so it wasn't a matter of memory. On a full night's sleep, including REM sleep, the participants demonstrated the ability to precisely recognize the emotions expressed in the various faces. Their brains had no trouble separating one emotion from another across the delicately changing gradient. The accuracy of their own ratings proved this to be true. They could fairly effortlessly discern between friendly signals from even those facial expressions showing minor threat. But when those same participants were deprived of sleep, they could no longer distinguish one emotion from another with accuracy. Literally gone was the precise ability to read giveaway clues in another's face. And notice this. With the absence of sleep. Now we were talking last week or the week before about our worldview, right? With the absence of sleep, the participants slipped into a default of fear bias, believing that even gentle or somewhat friendly-looking faces were threatening. Their perceptions, of course, none of our perceptions are 100% reality, but their perceptions were certainly no longer reality. Their world had become a place of danger. Through the removal of REM sleep, the participants had lost the ability to read the social world around them accurately. This couldn't really be more important. All right. Just two more. First, our immune system. Our immune system. Sleep fights against infection and sickness. You know that. That's why when you're sick, the body wants you to sleep. And just one night of reduced sleep leads to a serious weakening of our entire immune system. Just a few nights of short sleeping leads to our bodies becoming immunologically weak. And you know we have the killer cells, kind of like the Green Berets or the Navy SEALs. They identify foreign elements and eliminate them. And this includes even cancer cells. Obviously, we want our killer cells on duty at all times. But when we don't get enough sleep, we don't have that. Okay? Dr. Michael Irwin at the University of California performed what has been referred to as landmark studies in this area, and he demonstrated that a single night of 4 hours sleep, like going to bed at 3 a.m., waking up at 7 a.m., swept away 70% of the natural killer cells circulating in the immune system as compared to a full 8-hour night of sleep. This was in healthy young men. A study in Europe involving 25,000 individuals demonstrated that sleeping on average 6 hours or less was associated with a 40% increased risk of developing cancer relative to those sleeping 7 hours or more a night. And similar results were found in a study tracking more than 75,000 women across an 11-year period. So when the Scripture says He gives His beloved sleep, there's a lot to that. Okay. Of course, we know the Lord has special grace for those who have newborns. We know that. He surely does. Now, perhaps the most serious of all these little topics that we've looked at, and that is actual genetics. Okay. Poor sleep habits increase our risk for developing Alzheimer's disease, cancer, diabetes, depression, obesity, hypertension, cardiovascular disease. But as I said, it gets worse. Sleep loss affects our very genetic code. It sabotages our DNA. DNA, of course, provides specific instructions to ourselves to perform particular functions. Studies done at the Surrey Sleep Research Center in England ominously demonstrated the effect of sleep loss on DNA. A group of healthy young men and women were restricted to 6 hours of sleep a night for just 1 week. They were all monitored under strict laboratory conditions, and after a week of mildly restricted sleep, the activity of an incredible 711 genes was distorted. This was relative to the genetic activity profile of those very same individuals when they obtained 8.5 hours of sleep for a week. About half of those 711 genes had been abnormally revved up in their expression by the loss of sleep, and these were the very genes that you don't want revved up. The other half had been diminished in their expression or shut down entirely. So the genes that were increased included those linked to chronic inflammation, cellular stress, various factors that cause cardiovascular disease. Among those turned down were genes that help maintain stable metabolism, optimal immune responses. Other studies have found that short sleep duration will also disrupt the activity of genes regulating cholesterol in the wrong direction. So not enough sleep brings a direct attack on the very physical structure of our genetic material itself. The spiral strands of DNA in our cells are tightly wound together into structures that we call chromosomes. And then they have this, so it's kind of like weaving individual threads together to make a sturdy shoelace. And then the ends of those very chromosomes are protected by a cap that has often been compared to the protective cap at the end of shoelaces. Same thing. And they're called telomeres. And obviously, if they become damaged, our DNA becomes exposed, and our genetic code becomes vulnerable and cannot operate properly. Studies of adults in their 40s, 50s, and 60s by numerous independent research teams around the world have found that the less sleep an individual obtains, or the worse the quality of sleep, the more damaged the capstone telomeres of that person's chromosomes. Now, in fairness, I want to say that the researchers haven't concluded that whether this is a causal association or something else. The particular nature of this telomere damage is caused by short sleeping appears to be the same as that in aging, which fortunately we don't have anybody here that would have that problem. Now, summarizing this talk here about our DNA, I'll just quote here Dr. Matthew Walker, who I referred to earlier, and who, as I said, wrote a tremendous book. And you can find him on YouTube. He's got wonderful things to say. I have, read different things and watched a lot of different things, but he is a world-renowned expert. So, notice what he says here. Again, everything we've talked about here is important in the life of the Christian. And certainly, if we get right down to our DNA, we're going to have to make wise decisions. Even now we have to, but in the future. Here's what he said. Quote, neglect sleep and you're deciding to perform a genetic engineering manipulation on yourself each night. Tampering with the nucleic alphabets that spells out your daily health story. Permit the same in your children and teenagers, and you are imposing a similar genetic engineering experiment on them as well. So, the Lord wants us, and I'm not putting myself forth as an example. I am blessed to have studied this whole topic, but try to benefit from what I've learned, and try to avoid late night appointments. Okay. But the Lord gives His beloved sleep. And in the words of 3 John, the Lord wants our health to prosper, even as our soul prospers. And He's given us sleep. And it's not a turn-off button. It is really a turn-on button. There's so much that goes on. It's sacred, really. When I first studied this, I thought, sleep is like a sacred thing. God is working. So I pray that we can all relate to this information or just these thoughts as we relate to the Lord about this. It's beneficial to every person. Amen.